everyone, and welcome to another edition of the vAuto podcast. I'm Lance Helgeson with vAuto, and I'll be your host for today's episode. Now, our topic for today's podcast addresses an issue that's on the minds of many dealers as they look to reach their new and used vehicle sales goals and profits. How best to merchandise those vehicles online to capture customer interest, engagement, and get their business. My guest is Jeremy Nowling, who knows a lot about this topic. Jeremy oversees the merchandising strategy and execution for the Rohrman Auto Group in the Midwest, and he's graciously agreed to share his perspective and time with us today. Jeremy, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me on the show, Lance. I greatly appreciate it.
You bet. Thanks for being here. Now, as a starting point, Jeremy, perhaps you could give our listeners a little bit of clarity and context on your role with Rohrman and maybe a quick snapshot of your career and how you landed on merchandising, as a key focus for what you do.
Sure. Well, like most of the listeners on this call, I'm a lifelong car guy. I've been doing it for 23 years now, and I've seen a lot of things happen to the industry. My current role with the Rohrman organization is Sales, Digital Retailing, and Implementation Director, meaning anything that has to do with the sale of a vehicle or sales process or setups or what's the best technology to use for our consumers to have the best experience. I do a lot of research on that and then toy around with it. And when it comes to digital retailing, it's become a recent passion. And so I drive to find out how can I market my vehicle the best to get the most eyeballs on it that will lead to a conversion. And so it's been a fun experience trying to find out what works and what doesn't work. Other areas that I'm in currently is I volunteer as a junior professor at Northwood University, and engaging with those students and the instructors there, it's helped me to get a competitive advantage to understand what are we teaching today's or tomorrow's car people that are going to be coming into this industry, and what are they focusing on? And a lot of their focus has moved towards digital retailing and knocking the borders out of your dealership to be able to sell anywhere. And by becoming a digital retailing expert, you can actually sell cars anywhere in the country now.
That's very true. Well, let's digital retailing is a big topic. So let me just narrow our focus here for a minute and the duration of the podcast on kind of the merchandising aspects of digital retailing. And given all the research and testing and trying that you just spoke of, Jeremy, I'm kind of curious, how over the last maybe 3 to 5 years would you say that merchandising has really changed and why?
Well, I'll hit the why first. So if you go back 3 years, I would say that COVID changed a lot of things on retailers, on how do I get my consumers to see my vehicles better. And the purpose and how it's changed is we can go back as far as you want, but if we're going to focus on 3 years, 3 years ago, we didn't pay a lot of attention to the third-party platforms and the algorithms of what drives your vehicles. And so for 3 years ago, when there was the COVID outbreak and manufacturers start to slow down on production, there was, you could just take some of the markets. So a Chicagoland market may only have 5,000 new cars and 15,000 used cars for sale. Mm-hmm. And it's when a consumer is shopping, are they going to go through 300 pages of inventory to find the vehicles that they're looking for? What can you do as a dealer to merchandise that vehicle to get the extra lift to put you on the first 20 to 50 pages where a consumer will focus? And even if they're brand specific, how can you get those eyeballs on your vehicle first versus last?
What are the elements now? Price will certainly have an impact, on how stuff shows up on Auto Trader and the other classified sites. But as we think about how you show the car and the merchandising, What have you found that are sort of must-haves today that maybe weren't must-haves not so long ago?
Well, if we look at just Auto Trader, there are things that drive that algorithm, and it's a newly listed price badge along with the good price badge, the great price badge. And so when you think about trading in a vehicle, if a dealer's average reconditioning or time to online presence exceeds 7 days, they already lose that advantage on the newly listed algorithm push. And
Mhm.
so by taking a vehicle and immediately uploading multiple trade-in photos that are good trade-in photos, not the interior being dirty or a customer's license plate, those are things that'll help to get those eyeballs on your vehicle sooner. When you look at adding additional things within merchandising with 360s,
Mhm.
driving that customer experience, putting good banners on the vehicle that are relevant to that vehicle specifically. Those are things that will help to provide you better merchandising as well.
I'm not so sure that everybody, and I'll raise my hand and include myself in that mix. When you talk about banners, Jeremy, what do you mean? What's the banner, and what are the kinds of things you like to feature in the banner?
Yeah, so we're kind of new to this, and we've allowed the stores to take control of what they would like to push. So with banners, you can put anything from special APRs to recently discounted to specific features on those overlays. You can put um, anything additional to like recent trade. You can customize each and every banner that you would like to put on each individual vehicle on your inventory, and having it properly display on those third party sites. That may be a feature or a special promotion that catches that customer's attention to
Mhm.
be able to click further into that funnel and then go into the VDP.
I'm curious, as we talk about merchandising, Jeremy, what differences might exist, if any, between how you might merchandise a new vehicle versus a used vehicle?
Well, a used vehicle is a very specific car, right? I mean, there's not two of them alike.
Yep.
So, on a used car, the way that I would merchandise that is what were the qualities of that vehicle when it was traded in? Do you know much about it? Was it a one owner vehicle? Was it something that you serviced? Was it a lease trade in where you know the vehicle history on that car? And can you publish that? So many vehicles and concerns from consumers are that a vehicle was a rental car. And how was that vehicle driven by over 100 people? Whereas if you
Mhm.
can publish that the vehicle was a leased vehicle, one owner trade in that was serviced at your dealership, and you can put that in your overlays and banners, that may capture that customer's attention. No accidents, right? Because if the customer doesn't make it to the Carfax to actually view that, and you can say that in a banner or an overlay that it was a no accident, one owner, all service vehicle, they'll catch that as they're going through the carousel. And then hopefully that leads them to the end of the lead to where they submit a lead on that vehicle.
And so, if focusing on used vehicles for a second, what about the type of work that you guys might do to recondition a car? How does that play
Sure.
into the merchandising mix?
Sure. So you can publish that, and we may get to the point where we talk about intelligent promotions, but there's things that you can do within either the overlays or the banners or even billboards that you can publish what you do to uh, inspect a vehicle on your lot. And every dealer, I'm sure, has a different multi-point inspection, but if you're telling the consumer through the carousel that you performed a 160 point or 175 point inspection on this vehicle and it's completely reconditioned and ready to go, that's just another way of talking to the customer through the carousel.
Hmm. Now, I've noticed in looking at some of the vehicles at one of your stores, Indy Honda specifically, Jeremy, um, that they generally, and I'm thinking on the used side here, it seems like 36 photos is fairly common. I'm curious why that number is sort of your chosen number, and secondarily, as you guys think about the sequencing of what goes where in that carousel. How do you guys think about that?
Sure. So with the 36 photos, I remember when it used to just be, get 15 photos.
Yeah.
And these are recommendations by the third-party marketing companies. So what I've done is I've collected a lot of information from a lot of the third parties, and asked them what drives that algorithm. And photos is always one of the top, right? And with consumers nowadays, they don't have the time to visit 6 dealerships on a Saturday. As a matter of fact, they spend 10 to 14 hours online. So if I want to talk to a consumer, I want them to be able to see every photo that I can take on this vehicle. And by doing that, that's also helping me to drive my relevance on those sites. But it comes down to providing that consumer the best experience possible digitally. And the other question of, so we did, go ahead.
Well, sequencing, I guess. You got 36 photos. What goes first? What goes last? And what's in the middle?
Well, you want that angle to talk to the customer, that limo pull up, right? You want it to just show them how does it look as they're walking out to it. So we try to make that our very first photo. And as going through the rest of the sequence, there's been multiple studies, and I can turn to the Cox photo study that you guys have performed as where does the customer focus and at what point do we lose their attention? And if you're looking for those specific photos, it doesn't always have to be all exterior photos first. You could do it with an exterior followed by a dash photo, followed by what does the center console look like, by the side vision, and what does the car look like in the trunk. So you want to be able to talk to that customer through that photo sequence. And furthermore is when you get to the end of it, do you have a 360? Can that customer grab all of those photos that you took and spin it around and go into detail and look for features that are on that car?
Interesting. Now, you mentioned a moment ago about intelligent promotion. That's something that Cox Automotive offers. How are you using that particular solution in your merchandising mix?
Yeah, so I have a few guys that have jumped on this very quickly, and you can create multiple promotions within your store that will help to automate the merchandising on your vehicles. And if you like certain banners and overlays to be published on every single vehicle, it can do it. If you want to build billboards that talk about you as a dealer, you can push that in there as well. If there's certain advantages of buying a car that's been through these multi-point inspections that qualifies for certain warranties or benefits, you can put that in there. And the billboards is just another way of, if you think about, driving down the road, right? What do you see all up and down the interstates? Billboard after billboard after billboard. Right. So if you can strategically place those billboards within your carousels, that's just another way of being able to talk to consumers.
And you touched on a point there about efficiency, doing things in sort of an automated, not manual kind of way. And we spent a few minutes here talking about all these elements, photos and 360s and billboards and such. What would you say, Jeremy, is kind of the average time it takes to properly merchandise a car, given all the things that you want to put out there?
I would say that you can properly merchandise a vehicle within 20 minutes now, and that's on the high side. If you're really good at it and you've got the repetition down, what boxes to check, and we provide that information to our merchandising managers or used car managers that are putting it out there. It's changed over the years, because over the years it was, hey, go take some photos, and you would take those photos yourself probably. And now you have teams of people, whether they're lot service providers or you've brought in your own spin booth and you hired a team that handles your reconditioning and your photos. That's helped to alleviate a lot of that time that you would spend merchandising.
So say 20 minutes on the high side is less than what it might have been a couple years ago. Is that fair?
That's fair to say.
Okay, wonderful. Now, and you just mentioned something I want to get into. You have merchandising managers at your Rohrman stores. So tell us a little bit about how, and I think you mentioned earlier also, Jeremy, that they kind of have a little rope to run with in terms of how they do things. So I'm curious how you manage what they're doing, and then we'll talk about measuring the results. But how do you keep everybody kind of on the same page and rowing in the same direction?
Sure. So our used car director is Luke Rohrman, and he follows. He's very well organized, and these guys are pretty sharp when it comes to the market and what do we need to stock and what's selling currently in the market, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so they'll set up some parameters for these merchandising managers. And a merch manager is something we didn't hear of 8, 10 years ago, right? That
Right.
was something that came along when inventory became very scarce and you needed somebody to watch all of the different auction sites. And obviously, the days of raising your hand at the auction, those are over. So now it's all about how many proxy bids can I put in to acquire these vehicles. Well, a traditional used car manager or a sales manager, it's impossible for them to sit there and TO customers, desk deals, acquire new inventory, and then their day-to-day responsibilities. They can't just sit there and buy cars all day. So the merchandising managers have been a great asset to the stores now as we look to continue to grow our inventory. Inventory shortages were never a thing with us on used cars.
Right.
We didn't have that issue. We stayed stock the entire time, and we still continue to do so. And strategically, I would say that that's a better question for Luke. But when you set up certain parameters of, hey, don't buy vehicles that are older than this or exceed these miles, or the day supply exceeds this. Those are just some of the parameters that we set up for those guys.
And so then, if I'm reading you right or hearing you properly, Jeremy, so the merchandising manager actually tends to have a purchasing acquisition role as well.
That's correct.
Okay. And do you find that blending those roles just is, so in other words, I guess they can get the right car following the parameters that Luke sets out, but then the merchandising can kick right then and there. Is that how they work?
It's instant. So if you want to get eyeballs on a vehicle very quickly, and you have somebody who's off-site or down the road buying vehicles for you, you at the desk don't know that. But that merchandising manager, he knows that he's still inside of that auction site, and he can download those photos, immediately publish those photos, and again, go back to using different overlays or banners to say just acquired, in transit, whatever you want to say, to be able to start generating those eyeballs on the vehicle sooner.
Is there and to your point, Jeremy, that merchandising managers as such didn't really exist. So what does that type of individual look like? Let's say I'm a dealer, I've never been down that road.
Sure.
What are the characteristics and skill set that I should be thinking about if I want to go there?
I would say look for the guys who, I could age myself on this as well, but our old school guys that they like to go raise their hand at the auction and carry around a black book, right? Now, if you show them how to jump on StockWave and look at multiple sites and acquire vehicles, that could be one guy that fits the role. But you can also find, and we have found many guys that are very tech savvy, and they can jump through multiple sites and know how to navigate through those sites and put out all of these proxy bids to acquire those vehicles and merchandise them.
So I guess is there, last little thing on the merchandising side, how do you measure a job well done on merchandise? How do you know all these things are working? And I'm just curious, if I'm your merchandising manager, how do I get compensated for doing the right job?
Sure. Well, obviously by how many vehicles did they acquire would be one true way of measuring them.
For
if
sure.
You're in the same region and you have multiple stores in that region, and you've got one guy that at this store that acquired 100 used vehicles from auctions, and the guy down the street only acquired 25, that's who I'm focusing on, is the guy who only bought 25. What's his hesitation? Why does he want to pull the trigger? Is he not putting enough proxy bids out? Is something else distracting him from his main focus, which is vehicle acquisition. As
Mhm.
for our pay structure, those pay structures can be built multiple ways. And obviously, our pay structure is to incentivize them to buy the vehicles that fit those parameters. And without getting into actual dollar amounts, I would say that that's something set up by the used car director, Luke Rohrman, with the guidance of also our CEO, Ryan, and being able to, it has to be something that incentivizes them, because anybody who's buying vehicles, they already know how tough it is, right?
Yeah.
It has to be something that motivates them to get in there and put out multiple bids a day and to be able to circle back and to acquire those vehicles and not just focus on one specific site. They have to branch out and look at everywhere. And then
Right.
again, I think it all comes down to training. And do you have a solid process inside of your store for that merch manager to be able to acquire vehicles and then go straight to merchandising those vehicles? And so it's a twofold, right? So if I have someone, do I want that guy to just click and buy, and he throws a buy sheet over and it waits 2 or 3 days before it gets stocked in or a description is reviewed on that vehicle? No, I don't want that. We would want a vehicle that's acquired, stocked in, merchandised, and published all within that same time frame.
I see. So part of my pay plan, if I'm that person, would be about the timeliness and the thoroughness of my merchandising. Like
Correct.
that piece is also okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We pay a lot of attention inside of the merchandising tabs within vAuto, that push us to also focus on time to online presence,
Mhm.
time to price. Yeah, so those are good focus areas.
Okay. Two other questions. When it comes to measuring the effectiveness of merchandising, I mean, if you're selling cars, and you're meeting your nut every month, that would seem to say it's working. But if you look closer, what are the kinds of metrics, Jeremy, that give you a sense that, yep, for this car, the merchandising is okay, but for this one, maybe not so good?
Yeah. So VDPs, that's a good thing. You can look at, if you're tied into Vin Solutions as a CRM and you have that tied into vAuto, and you want to see how many leads and opportunities have come in on that vehicle since you acquired that vehicle. If I have a car, and let's just say, I think everybody has a couple of those cars that could maybe exceed 60 days, but in 60 days, if that vehicle hasn't had an internet lead, a phone up, or a walk-in on it, what's wrong with that car?
Yeah.
Does it come down to the price? Was it a bad buy? Was it not the right equipment? Have we not merchandised this vehicle? Because anybody can just keep continuing to hit discount, discount, discount. Sometimes it's just the wrong car. And at what point do you decide it's time to go ahead and cut your ties on that vehicle and just get rid of it?
Okay. One final question, Jeremy. Let's pretend that you have a crystal ball. And I guess I'm curious, if we look ahead maybe 3 to 5 years, how do you think merchandising vehicles will look different than it is today? And maybe what should dealers be doing to prepare for that?
Well, I would say that as social sites become more relevant in today's shopper, I think that you'll start to see more and more people pushing out to, the Facebook, the Instagrams, the TikToks, and obviously your third party, your big three, right? Your Auto Trader, Car Gurus, and Cars.com. And does that align with the strategies of what the store believes, right? So one thing for us is I'm paying a lot of attention to, is a lot of these third parties are looking for that end-to-end solution for a consumer, right?
Mhm.
So, and when you talk end-to-end, I mean, car gurus, you can now select different lenders. You could build out your deal. Do the dealers know how to do that? Do
Yeah.
I know how to do that? Right. And those are a lot of the things that I'm studying very hard right now is, um, if my shopper sees my vehicle, have I done everything that I need to do to make sure that his experience is very transparent so that he knows I bought a quality or traded for a quality used vehicle, that I can assure him that the service was done, that there's no blemishes that are going to cause him to not like that vehicle when he comes into the store. because if that merchandised vehicle is not true and you have bad photos, that's going to prevent that customer from even putting in the lead on that car. But even further is when you get to the digital retailing side of the merchandising, that customer now, and has for a little while, been able to build out his deal with down payment, monthly payments, submitting his trade-in, submitting his credit score. I would say that next step is those consumers being able to go ahead and click a checkout button and buy 100% online. And at what point does that car get to their front door? And do we offer that service? Because that's another big thing with merchandising is if you're not offering to deliver vehicles, you can go into Auto Trader. If that button's not checked, your vehicle's not going to display on those screens.
Interesting. That's good guidance for the future, Jeremy. Thank you for taking the time and sharing your perspective, Jeremy. I'm grateful for it, and I think it's going to be a useful podcast for our listeners. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you as well. It's a evolving market, and I think we all learn something new every day. And if we refuse to continue to learn, that's where we're going to be stuck in our ways. So yeah, I'm looking forward to continuing to listen to the show as we go forward.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jeremy, once again. And all of you listening in and watching, thank you for joining this episode of the vAuto podcast. Until next time, stay well.